Can a voice born from hunger and hardship move the hearts of millions? Can a boy with nothing but broken shoes and an old dream make even Simon Cowell fall silent? The night was electric at the America's Got Talent stage. Lights glimmered, cameras rolled, and the audience buzzed with excitement. Yet among the sea of contestants wearing glitter and smiles, one small figure stood trembling near the backstage curtain, a thin Filipino boy named Miguel Santos, clutching an old microphone borrowed from a friend. He wasn't there for fame or glory. He was there for Lola Rosa, the woman who had sacrificed her health to raise him on the dusty streets of Manila. His heart pounded not with fear of rejection, but with a prayer, that maybe, just maybe, this performance could change their lives forever. Behind him, the memories played like a silent film. Nights under a broken roof when rain leaked through holes, mornings selling candies at jeepney stops just to buy rice. He remembered the sound of Lola's coughing growing worse each day, and how singing was the only thing that made her smile. As Miguel stepped onto the stage, the crowd fell into a curious hush. His small frame, his worn clothes, they told a story of struggle before he even opened his mouth. The judges exchanged uncertain glances, unaware that in the next few minutes, their hearts would be shaken by a voice that carried the weight of a lifetime. The spotlight burned bright on his face. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and let his voice rise, soft, trembling, then soaring like a cry from the heavens. The first note echoed across the hall, silencing whispers, freezing even Simon in his chair. No one expected that sound from a street boy. And as the final note lingered, an emotional question filled every heart. How could someone who had so little give so much through just a song? In the narrow alleys of Tonda, Manila, where the scent of fried street food mixes with the dust of survival, Miguel Santos had learned to make music out of noise. Every morning, before the city fully woke, he'd walk barefoot along cracked pavements, carrying a tin can filled with coins, his daily earnings from singing at jeepney stops and busy corners. Miguel was just 13, but his eyes carried the weight of someone far older. There was a quiet strength in him, the kind born from years of learning how to smile even when life gave him nothing to smile about. His voice wasn't trained by teachers or studios, it was molded by rainstorms, empty stomachs, and nights when he sang to drown out the sound of hunger. He lived in a small shanty made of rusted metal sheets with his Lola Rosa, his grandmother. She was frail now, her back bent and her breath short, yet her faith was unshakable. She often told him, "When you sing, the angels listen, Miguel." Those words became his heartbeat, the invisible force that kept him standing when the world looked away. Each day followed the same rhythm, selling candies at stoplights, singing for spare change, and returning home to share whatever he earned with Lola. In the evenings, he'd sit by the window, watching city lights flicker like unreachable stars. Sometimes, he'd whisper promises to the wind, that one day, he'd buy his grandmother a real home, one without holes in the roof or fear in the air. Despite everything, Miguel wasn't bitter. He found joy in small things, the laughter of other kids chasing tires, the smell of fresh bread from a nearby bakery he couldn't afford, the rare kindness of strangers who dropped an extra coin in his can. But inside, a silent ache grew stronger each day, the ache of knowing that dreams were for those who had the luxury to chase them. He often wondered if his voice could ever break through the walls of poverty that surrounded him. Yet deep down, even in the darkest moments, he believed one thing: his voice had a purpose, and someday, the world would hear it. The turning point in Miguel's young life came quietly, not with thunder or warning, but with the soft sound of his Lola's cough echoing through the night. It was deeper now, harsher than before. The kind of cough that made the walls tremble and Miguel's heart tighten. For weeks, he had pretended not to notice. He told himself she would get better with rest, with warm tea, with faith. But deep inside, he knew, their fragile little world was breaking. The medicine they needed was far beyond what a boy with a tin can could earn. Every coin he collected felt smaller, every song he sang felt heavier. Lola Rosa stopped going to church, stopped cooking. She'd just sit by the window, watching the same horizon Miguel used to dream beneath. Her voice, once full of gentle wisdom, began to fade like a candle running out of wax. And when she smiled, it was no longer the smile of hope, it was the smile of goodbye. Each night, Miguel sang beside her bed. Not to entertain, but to fight the silence, that cruel silence that threatened to take her away. He'd sing softly until dawn, his voice cracking as tears mixed with his song. Sometimes, he'd fall asleep sitting upright, her frail hand still in his. Then one morning, he woke to find her gone, her hand cold, her eyes peacefully closed. The world seemed to stop moving. The city noise, the tricycles, the vendors, everything became distant. He was alone now, a child with no family, no home, and nothing left but his voice. For days, he wandered the streets in a fog of grief, his voice silent for the first time. Singing had always been his prayer, his hope, his only friend. But now, every note reminded him of her absence. It was in that emptiness, that unbearable loneliness, that he made a silent vow. He would sing again, not for coins or applause, but for her. For the woman who believed his voice could reach heaven. And if heaven truly listened, he wanted Lola Rosa to hear him one last time. Days turned into weeks after Lola Rosa's passing, and the world felt colder than ever. Miguel drifted through Manila's streets like a shadow, singing less, speaking little, his eyes hollow but searching for something unseen. He slept near the church steps where he used to sing with his grandmother, his voice now locked behind grief and silence. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the slums in gold, Miguel sat beside a busy jeepney stop. His old tin can lay empty. He hadn't sung for days. Then, a little girl, no older than 6, tugged his sleeve and asked softly, "Kuya, why don't you sing anymore?" Her innocent eyes reminded him of himself, the same hope, the same hunger. Something inside him stirred. Slowly, he lifted his head and began to sing. The voice that had been buried beneath sorrow broke free once more, raw, cracked, but filled with truth. The street fell silent. Drivers stopped. Vendors turned. Even traffic seemed to pause as the sound of one boy's grief rose into the air. Among the small crowd that gathered, a foreign man with a camera stood recording. He looked moved, wiping his eyes as he filmed the scene. After the song ended, he approached Miguel gently, asking his name and story. Miguel didn't know it yet, but that moment, that stranger's camera, would change everything. Within days, the video spread across social media. The world saw a barefoot boy singing his heart out for his lost grandmother. Comments poured in, people from around the globe calling him, the boy with the voice of pain and hope. Then came the message that would alter his destiny, an invitation to audition for America's Got Talent. Miguel held the letter with trembling hands, unsure if it was real. A street boy, singing on the world's biggest stage? It felt impossible, yet something in his heart whispered, this is her sign. That night, as he gazed at the stars, Miguel made a promise to the sky. He would go. He would sing. And he would make the world hear the song his Lola never got to see. The road from Manila's streets to the grand stage of America's Got Talent was far from easy. Miguel had never been on a plane before, he had never seen a city so bright, so loud, so full of people who didn't know his name. For a boy who once sang for coins, walking into that vast hall filled with cameras and lights felt like stepping into another world. Fear shadowed every heartbeat. The contestants around him were confident, rehearsed, dressed in perfect costumes, while he stood there in a simple shirt, holding the same microphone that had once echoed through Manila's streets. His English was broken, his confidence fragile, but deep down he carried something they didn't, a story carved by pain and love. He practiced every night in the small room the organizers gave him, whispering prayers before every note. Sometimes, he'd close his eyes and imagine Lola Rosa sitting in the front row, smiling, nodding, telling him that she was proud. And in those moments, he realized that his strength didn't come from perfection, it came from purpose. Still, the doubt crept in. What if the audience laughed? What if Simon didn't like him? He remembered all the times people had ignored him on the streets, all the moments when he sang to hungry air. But each fear became a lesson, every struggle had shaped the heart behind his voice. He learned to stand tall, not because he wasn't scared, but because courage was simply fear that kept going. He learned that music wasn't about fame or applause, it was about connection, about healing hearts that had once been broken like his own. As the day of his audition approached, Miguel stood before the mirror, took a deep breath, and whispered, "For you, Lola." It wasn't just a song anymore, it was his story, his pain, his love turned into sound. In that moment, he wasn't just a poor boy from the slums. He was a messenger of hope, proof that even the smallest voice could rise above the noise and reach the hearts of millions. The day of the audition arrived, a day that would etch Miguel's name into millions of hearts. The grand stage of America's Got Talent stretched before him, its lights brighter than anything he'd ever seen. The crowd murmured, the judges leaned forward, and the air buzzed with anticipation. Miguel stepped out, his tiny frame swallowed by the enormity of the moment. The microphone trembled in his hand. For a brief second, he almost turned back. But then, he remembered Lola Rosa's warm voice in his heart, "When you sing, the angels listen." He closed his eyes. The music began. The first note escaped like a fragile prayer, soft, trembling, and then grew, soaring through the vast hall. His voice carried everything he had ever felt, the loneliness of sleeping on cold streets, the hunger of forgotten days, the ache of losing his grandmother, and the unshakable love that had kept him alive. Every word, every breath, felt like a conversation with heaven. The audience fell silent. The judges stared, frozen, as if time itself had stopped. Even Simon Cowell, the man known for his unbreakable composure, leaned forward, his eyes glistening, his lips parting but finding no words. As Miguel reached the final note, the hall filled with a haunting stillness. Then, an eruption. The crowd rose to their feet, clapping, shouting, crying. It was as if the entire world stood for him, for the little boy who once sang for coins. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he bowed his head. He didn't need to win, in that moment, he already had. He had sung his story, and the world had listened. Simon stood up slowly, his voice barely above a whisper, "That was one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard." The golden buzzer slammed down, showering Miguel in a rain of gold confetti. Under the golden storm, Miguel looked up, tears sparkling in the lights. He whispered silently to the heavens, "We did it, Lola." And somewhere, beyond the lights and applause, it felt as though an angel was smiling back. When the lights dimmed and the applause faded, Miguel stood quietly backstage, still covered in golden confetti. It didn't feel real, the cheers, the tears, the shining faces that had once been strangers. For a boy who had spent his life unseen, it was overwhelming. But deep inside, he knew the truth, this moment wasn't about fame. It was about faith, the kind his grandmother had given him when the world gave nothing else. He didn't walk away that night as a celebrity. He walked away as a child who had finally found his purpose. The world had heard his pain and answered it with love. Through his voice, thousands of others, street kids, dreamers, forgotten souls, saw a reflection of their own struggles. They saw proof that hope can bloom even in the darkest alleys. In the days that followed, Miguel's story spread across the world. People called him the boy who made Simon cry. Yet to him, the real victory was something simpler. He could finally send money back home, build a small house where other children like him could eat, sleep, and dream without fear. He called it Lola's home. Standing in that house months later, Miguel placed a single candle by the window, just where his grandmother used to sit. As the flame flickered, he whispered softly, "You were right, Lola, angels do listen." Life had taught him that greatness doesn't come from what you have, but from what you give. And the purest music isn't sung from comfort, it's born from love, from pain, from the courage to keep going even when the world stays silent. Miguel's journey reminded everyone who heard his story that dreams aren't limited by poverty, or language, or loss. Sometimes, one fragile voice is all it takes to move mountains, or hearts. Because the truth is simple yet eternal. You don't need to be rich to shine. You just need to believe that your light matters, and keep singing, even when no one's listening.